Red Dead Redemption. That's the answer you're likely to get when asking someone what the perfect game is. People might say that the Red Dead series is perfect in every way and wouldn't need to be changed.
However, in classic Rockstar fashion, there are many holes left in the story that can be filled with more games. What happened in Blackwater? What happened to Jack? What happened to Red Harlow? These are all questions that could be answered.
In today's video, we, along with some of the best creators in the Red Dead community, will be going over all of our theories as to what a fourth installment in the Red Dead series would look like.
Without further ado, let's dive deep into these theories, starting with our own.
So as you might know, the main protagonist of Red Dead Revolver, Red Harlow, is the only protagonist in the Red Dead series that doesn't die at the end of his story. He walks off screen, never to be seen again.
It never was about the money.
Now don't get ahead of yourself, this is not just a Red Harlow sequel, there's a twist here. During the story of Red Dead Redemption 1, John Marston meets legendary gunslinger Landon Ricketts, who is old and rugged by the time John Marston runs into him. They build a connection with each other whilst Ricketts helps John with his tasks, but this all starts with Ricketts teaching Marston a few pointers on shooting. Landon Ricketts and John Marston are both dead by the end of the story, but as the saying goes, history tends to repeat itself. We don't know what happens to Jack Marston, but what if he were to run into an old, rugged Red Harlow? The dynamic they would have would be sort of that of Doc Brown and Marty McFly, but obviously a bit more devious. The only problem we run into is that both of these characters have finished their business in their own games. Red Harlow killed the man that killed his parents, and Jack Marston killed the man that killed his father. But it's these aspects about them that they have in common that would make them a great pair. But their story would need a reason to exist. They would need some sort of evil to go against. But that's where I'll leave my theory. Let me know in the comments what you think Red Harlow and Jack Marston would face together. And without further ado, Liam.
So I'm sure that we can all agree that Arthur Morgan is one of the most badass protagonists in the Rockstar Games catalog. But we're still not sure of the upbringing Arthur had. During the story of Red Dead Redemption 2, Arthur mentions his father a few times. And when talking about him, Arthur shows a clear distaste for his father, writing in his journal that he thinks of him as a no-good bastard, and even saying that his father should have died sooner.
My daddy, well, I watched him die, and it weren't soon enough.
But the thing is, if you look at the only picture that exists of Arthur's father, we can see that he sports the same hat as Arthur. So who is Lyle Morgan? Lyle Morgan was an outlaw likely from the years of 1850s all the way to the 1870s. He was eventually arrested for larceny and publicly hung in front of a crowd in 1874, and amongst this crowd was a young Arthur Morgan. I feel that this man might have had an interesting story to him, and an interesting story about the gang that he might have rode with. What if there was a game where we played through as Lyle Morgan, and like Arthur, Lyle's story ends when he is executed, and then you continue the story as a young Arthur falling in with Dutch and Hosea. Then we see the very early years of the gang. The mystery of Lyle Morgan is what makes him interesting. If he's anything like Arthur, his story will be very important, emotional, and gritty. But that concludes my theory of Red Dead Redemption 3, or maybe it would be called Red Dead Rebellion.
Alright, now that we have ourselves out of the way, it's time to bring out the other creators. So I present to you, the opener, ladies and gentlemen, Fizhy.
How I picture a Red Dead Redemption 3 or equivalent occurring is rather straightforward and relies on only two main points really. First and foremost, I imagine another Red Dead game would have to tell an entirely different story. The story of Arthur Morgan, John Marston and Jack Marston is done. The narratives of Red Dead Redemption and Red Dead Redemption 2 complement each other perfectly. The games can be played in either order and tell a poetic story that does not need further expansion that might confuse that synthesis. It's a perfectly balanced, excellently told circle. With that in mind, Red Dead 3, if it ever happens, and let's face it, in the modern video game and entertainment climate in general, franchises, let alone highly successful ones, never die, should really take the foundations of the masterfully crafted world and provide us with a narrative completely or even mostly unrelated to the struggles of the Van der Linde gang. That could be a story more about a character we meet more in passing than anything, like Landon Ricketts, or it could be a narrative completely unshackled from the Red Dead story we know up until now, with new characters in new situations. The West is a very big place, and the possibilities for stories to be told in that setting are endless. Maybe it's time to have a new perspective on the West. Maybe the opposite is in order, the life of a bounty hunter or a lawman, or something to give us that separation from a well-crafted poetic narrative already told, and along with that new perspective, new characters, new struggles, new challenges for these characters to face, new character development opportunities, perhaps exploring similar themes or even different ones. I can imagine that being called Red Dead Redemption 3, or perhaps Red Dead followed by a different word taking into consideration the existence of Red Dead Revolver. The world of Red Dead Redemption 2 proves that this is the frontier of stories, a bird's nest for narratives, themes and struggles. It's a world we can get lost in. Therefore, a Red Dead Redemption 3 armed with the vastness of the West is something I cannot imagine being a struggle to slot in. The writing quality of Redemption 2 aside, the game's strength came from its ability to use the environment not just to aid the story being told and function as an elaborate backdrop, but also to tell us smaller, bite-sized stories and stranger missions, and in failing that simply in passing with carefully placed environmental storytelling that litters the worlds of Rockstar games, giving us an overload of minor information that doesn't convolute the story, simply providing a lived-in atmosphere as we traverse through the otherwise negative space. Red Dead Redemption 2 made a massive point of immersing us in the adventure. Provided that quality is retained going into potential future installments, the sky is the limit with just how good they can be. This aspect is something often overlooked in games. Many have rich worlds that are immersive and fantastic in their own ways, but this experience was special, and Rockstar knows it. Red Dead Redemption, and especially Red Dead Redemption 2, captured lightning in a bottle when it comes to atmosphere. The quality of the world building to provide it is honestly second to none. It'd be a total waste for Rockstar to not do anything with that. That's why, though I believe the story of redemption is over, Red Dead as a brand still has room to grow outwards and to tell new stories from different perspectives whilst highlighting the hardships of the ways of life of the Old West. It'd be interesting to see where Rockstar would go with it, and I feel as if this is the simplest approach for ensuring things still make sense and the continuity of what's already been done isn't compromised. And in my mind, it's also perhaps the best way for that very same purpose too.
Is 1865. The Confederacy is defeated, the South is in ruins, and the country is still divided. With millions of freed slaves, the Native American War still occurring, and President Abraham Lincoln assassinated, the United States enters the Reconstruction era. Needless to say, it's among one of the most important time periods for the United States, including out west. So what happened during Reconstruction? Reconstruction began on January 1st, 1863, when Abraham Lincoln signed the Emancipation Proclamation, declaring the majority of the nation's slave population free. In early 1864, President Lincoln begins Reconstruction in Union-occupied Louisiana. On January 31st, 1865, the 13th Amendment abolishing slavery throughout the Union wins congressional approval and is sent to the states for ratification. In April 1865, Lincoln gives his final speech. The Confederacy surrenders, and 6 days later, President Lincoln is assassinated. President Johnson announces his plan of presidential reconstruction. The year is now 1866, and obviously Reconstruction was not complete, as it wouldn't be until 1877. I think I did a great job setting the tone though. Who would we play as? I think the options are kind of unlimited. Now keep in mind, the Civil War might be over, but wars with Native Americans were rampant until the 1890s. So take your pick. Native American, freed slave, Union or Confederate soldier. Regardless of plot details or which character or characters, the Reconstruction era has so much going on. I'll leave it up to you, the viewer, to use your imagination and fantasize an outcome. I gave you the tools, now tell your story. When would the game take place? Anytime after the end of the Civil War. I figured it'd begin in the South, or maybe even like, I don't know, Saint Denis, Louisiana, New Orleans, right? Or elsewhere. And we progress through the story our way out west. I think the era of Reconstruction would make an awesome and fantastic setting. I'm SeanEazy, and that's my Red Dead Redemption 3 video game. Red Dead Reconstruction.
Hello, my name is Waxy. Big thanks to Mason and Liam for letting me be here. Now my idea for the next Red Dead game is a Landon Ricketts game set in the glory days of the Wild West. There's not too much to his backstory, but there is some to base the game off of. Ricketts was a reformed gunslinger during the height of the American West. Stories of his adventures and fights were commonplace during John Marston's childhood. John was born in 1873, meaning that the game could take place during this time period. We can roughly guess that Ricketts is 64 in Red Dead 1, so this places Ricketts' birth year in 1847. Now there are some things in Ricketts' past that I will add to the story. An important part to add is his cowardliness. Landon Ricketts cheated in a lot of his duels. The only thing that kept him alive for so long was his will to survive. When you think of him, you might think he's an old badass cowboy, but it's hinted at that he's just a liar. And this could be an interesting part of his story. Here's where I get into the speculation and theories about the plot of the game, so don't take this as if this is real. I'm just going to be talking about it as if it was. Anyway, let's get into it. The game opens on a writer finishing his book. The camera zooms to show the book's name, An Outlaw's Tale, Landon Ricketts. Two Crows, aka Ricketts Ranch, 1864. A young Landon Ricketts, 14 years old, living with his family. His father is just a farmhand, Lee Ricketts, but his brother dreams of becoming an outlaw. The Wild West was most popular during this time, so the brother hears about outlaws and bank robbers thinking it's cool. But becoming an outlaw is against his father's wishes. The father is a simple man not wanting any harm done to his kids since he lost his wife, but the brother wants his name to become infamous, Lewis Ricketts. He tries to get his younger brother to see the glory in it, but by this point, Landon Ricketts doesn't buy into the life. Here's where we get a prologue of doing simple missions around the ranch, getting to know his family and getting to know the local cattle rustlers. It's a group of 6 men. They rob farmers, banks, and about anything they could get their hands on. And when they show up to the Ricketts Ranch trying to steal horses, one of their men gets killed by Lewis. They run off, but they want vengeance. They come back the following night. By now the Ricketts sold the horses, the cattle, and hid their money, so now they wait for the men to show up. They come blasting at the house. The father comes outside with Landon and Lewis behind him. They stop shooting, but the men are insistent that they want all their money. Lewis starts shooting. Lee insists that they go inside, but Landon and Ricketts stick by him. But when Lee gets shot in the shoulder, they rush inside. They run to the back and Lee gets a horse and puts Lewis and Landon on it, sending them away, making it seem like he'd be right with them. But after 5 minutes of riding, they stop and realize that he's not coming, and go back to the ranch to see him dead. Both devastated, but both want revenge. This is where Landon gets the urge to be an outlaw. They hunt the men down and find them in a town named Brimstone in a saloon and shoot them in the back of the head before they can even blink. An anticlimactic way to kill them, but that's the point. The game should be about the fame of becoming an outlaw, and they tell everyone everywhere they go their story, spreading the word that they're the toughest outlaws of the West, but truly they shot them in the back of the head. The brothers don't know what they're doing, but after time they learned a lifestyle. This could be through years and years where we get to rob banks and see the Wild West in its glory. One robbery sees them in a bank in a small town where they're trying to rob the place. Two more men come into the bank with masks and guns. These people are the Butcher brothers. Landon and Lewis point their guns at them, but the brothers call a parley and they stop. By now the lawmen are outside, so Landon quickly grabs the money and they shoot their way out of the bank and out of town. The Butcher brothers follow, and after the lawmen stop following, the Butcher brothers propose an idea: a big city bank. It's a 4-person job, and after some planning they're ready to do it, and the job goes off without a hitch, making them all enough money to last a lifetime. But just when they escape and meet up, they shoot Lewis and Landon. The Butcher brothers didn't realize it, but Landon survives. After his brother's death, he doesn't care about anything. He makes his money through cheating and poker, and anyone who calls him out are getting a shot in the back. But he gets a lead about the Butcher brothers and where they are, so after hunting them down, he shoots them dead by shooting them in the back. By this point, he moves from town to town telling his stories and just living his life as a retired outlaw. It's one of these towns he moves to where things get rough: the Blackwater Massacre, 1899. Alright, I know it's still debated on whether or not he's actually involved in the massacre, but I'm not really gonna go into detail. You kinda know what happens, but after the massacre, Landon moves until he reaches Eastern California in 1902. It's said he gets in a gunfight, but Rockstar can expand on this. I'm not really gonna go into every little detail, but after the gunfight, he moves to Mexico where we see him in Red Dead 1. I know most of what I said was pretty cliche and short, but it's Rockstar's job to expand the story. I think my little summary of what a Landon Ricketts game could look like fits with the style of the Red Dead games. But that ends my segment. Thank you again to Mason and Liam. Peace out.
So my thoughts kind of differ to what other people like to think. Me personally, I'd love to have a game that's a prequel with Micah Bell being the protagonist. I know many people won't be a fan of this concept, as Micah's the antagonist of Red Dead Redemption 2. But just hear me out on this one. The story would begin as Micah being a 17-year-old, committing a double homicide with his father, Micah Bell Jr. This leads Micah to be on the negative side of the law, being wanted for the first time, being on the bad side of the government for the first time ever. From that, we would see Micah progress as a character and see the heinous acts of murder he's done, such as the lynching of the farm couple he did with his father, or many robberies he's committed with characters such as Skinny, Lee, and Joe. After this, we'd see Micah go to a place called Crenshaw Hill. This location is where Micah meets Dutch Vanderlyn. He meets Dutch at a bar after saving his life. Now, looking at this from one perspective, the game could end here. Somehow Rockstar could figure out the ending to be perfect, aligning with Red Dead Redemption 2. Seeing Micah Bell save Dutch, somehow ending the game, but to me that wouldn't seem like a perfect ending. But looking at this from the other perspective, we could see the few months that built up to the Blackwater ferry heist. Micah was in the gang for about 5 to 6 months before this happened, so we would get plenty of content with the gang. We could see many loved characters such as Arthur Morgan even as NPCs, while we play as Micah. There are many plot points that we learn in Red Dead Redemption 2 that take place during this time, so it wouldn't be hard to fill some of the gaps. We may look at his relationship with Jenny Kirk, and also as a mission we could see Micah Bell planning the ferry heist. The ferry heist led to the gang's demise, so it would be a very interesting concept to see it actually play out. Imagine the final mission was us playing as Micah in the Blackwater Massacre. Now this would be a good ending since we leave it at a high note, and it would lead perfectly into Red Dead Redemption 2. But again, we could continue further. Looking at this from a third perspective, we could see the events that take place between the years 1899 and 1907, obviously between the main Red Dead story and the epilogue, where we see Micah meet his demise. We could see certain parts of Red Dead Redemption 2 that we've already seen, but from Micah's perspective. Now I know this is unheard of, and Rockstar Games probably would not actually do this, but it's a cool concept nonetheless. We could play as Micah leaving Arthur on that cliff. We could play as Micah getting shot by John. There's so much possibilities that we could actually dive into. If the game did take the route of showing the years between 1899 and 1907, we would see many robberies, the rise of Micah's gang he had in American Venom, where the Blackwater money was, or why Micah shot that family. This one could lead to the game ending by Micah being shot by John, but again, that would lead to 2 Red Dead Redemption games having the same ending, and obviously that wouldn't work out probably. It would give old players a reason to buy the game, since we see a popular character that doesn't stray too far from the main game. Of course, this probably would not work for a Red Dead Redemption 3. But then again, I think it could if it was made correctly. Obviously some of the concepts would have to be changed. Obviously there's other aspects that they could look into, such as Micah Bell's relationship with his brother, his father, and everything else like that. Mike has so much history that it could take a deep dive in a completely different game. But again, it would be a hard make, but genuinely I think it would work out.
Hello everybody, I'm Snook, and this is my theory for Red Dead Redemption 3. Mac Callender is a character mentioned in Red Dead Redemption 2 a lot. What's really fascinating about him isn't what they actually say, but what they don't say. When Arthur talks to Dutch in Horseshoe Overlook, you're given an item quest to bring Dutch a pipe. In the official game, you give it to him, and that's it. What was cut was that when you give it to him, Dutch asks how Arthur was able to escape the commotion and regroup with the others at the northern Blackwater border. Arthur sadly admits that when Boadicea, his previous horse, has been shot in a gunfight, he was pinned with Mac Callender. What Mac did was that he let Arthur take his own horse while he holds the Pinkertons off, believing that they both won't have time to escape, and Mac decides to be the distraction. Arthur apparently would never tell anyone this, and it's interesting how this was cut out of the game, plus the extra dialogue that the gunslinger coat used to be Mac's. Arthur would have said that in a conversation cutout that would have been with Hosea. With some other knowledge gotten within the game, we can deduce that Mac and Davey joined the gang a long time ago, meaning that both of them at least joined the gang when Arthur was perhaps 17 or barely 18 or 2 to 4 years after the gang was formed, which is another reason why he's a good candidate, because his story can follow around the beginning and all the way towards his death at the ferry heist, giving us full circle we desire. It's also pretty clear that Rockstar is already setting him up as the protagonist. There's around 20 plus more dialogue cut from the game that's about him, and I haven't mentioned them yet, but there's still a lot of talk about them in the full release. The character Mac Callender holds great potential as the protagonist for Red Dead Redemption 3. The act of sacrificing himself to save Arthur during a gunfight showcases his bravery and loyalty. In conclusion, Mac Callender possesses the qualities, narrative potential, and established groundwork, making him an appealing candidate for a central role in the next installment of the Red Dead Redemption series.
I believe that Jack Marston is the key to a fourth Red Dead game. Now, since it is the year 1914, the last time we saw him, we can't make it a complete Western game. Instead, I see Jack enter a life of crime through the Prohibition era. The game could take place in multiple different locations, but I think the most likely area would be the current Red Dead Redemption 2 map. Due to the development of the country during that time, there will be many changes to the look of the map, including the theme. Small towns like Armadillo will probably remain the same, but bigger towns like Saint-Denis will be far more developed, with the towns expanding their area into the forests and the swamps. We may see automobiles being used for the first time, along with new technology and advanced weapons. All of this could build the perfect fourth entry in the Red Dead series. Alternatively, I can see Jack living a more realistic life, with him most likely being drafted to fight in the Great War in 1917. Or maybe we completely ignore both scenarios for Jack, and instead he becomes an author, which is what he intended to do in the first place. All of these scenarios are realistic for Jack's future, but one thing I know for sure, Rockstar have never failed to surprise us in the past.
Imagine a Red Dead game where you play as none other than Uncle, the man with no name, at least no name that we know of. We could possibly see Uncle as a boy after his parents die in the prologue. We know he supposedly was homeless after the age of 9 and drifted around for a while. We could see who Uncle truly is and why he is the way he is. Similar to Red Dead Revolver, it would be an action-packed, wacky spaghetti western-styled game. We could see a quick-draw Uncle, nicknamed the One-Shot Kid, a ruthless teen with a draw quick as lightning. It would take place more in the west, but having some of the new Hanover and West Grizzlies location return. We could also see Revolver locations return, such as Brimstone, Widow's Patch, and Tarnation. We could see him do bounty hunting, eventually slow down and do ranching, or vice versa, a rancher who was quick on the draw, so he did bounty work on the side for a quick buck. Missions would focus mainly on Uncle's adventures between 1865 and 1895, eventually meeting Abigail, Dutch, and the rest of the gang.
story takes place into the early days for the Vanderlinde gang. Arthur Morgan, a young and eager outlaw, finds himself in the company of Dutch Vanderlinde and Hosea Matthews. As the trio navigates the rugged landscapes of the American frontier, they encounter a series of challenges and obstacles. They engage in small-time robberies. Throughout their journey, Arthur learns about the injustices, experiencing the first-hand the brutality of those in power. These experiences shape his worldview and fuel his desires for a life outside the confines of a society's rule. As the bond between Arthur, Dutch, and Hosea grows stronger, they attract like-minded individuals who are drawn to their vision of a life free from oppression. The gang slowly takes shape. We will also know about the Mac Calendar and his brother David, and we might see some mission regarding the Blackwater robbery. Arthur's torn between loyalty to his chosen family and his own personal journey find himself at the center of this turmoil. Thank you again to Jonkers. That's all my theory.
Thank you so much for watching this video. Big shout out to everybody who was involved in the creation on this project. Swayer, Outlaw, Snook, Waxy, SeanEazy, Fizhy, Red Dead Dreams, and Hound Royalz. You guys are amazing people. Thank you to the viewer, you guys, for watching this video and for making all of this happen. This would not be possible without you. Again, thank you. I can't say it enough. And until next time, everybody, have a zonkin' wonkin' day.
That's the way it is. That's the way